Paul, I oftentimes poo-poo folks when they tell me about volatility in the markets, because I've heard people describe 2024 as a volatile market, and it just plain old wasn't. But, there's a lot of different things that affect people's perceptions of volatility. One of them is the Dow Jones Industrial Average, because it's just always been a part of market reporting. And these days, today we're having a 250-point swing that represents about 0.2%, and it's not that significant. However, this year, you can absolutely claim volatility is back in fashion, and whether you want to measure with the VIX, which reached 34 back in April, which is highest you saw since COVID levels. Whether you want to talk about any other measure in the bond market, etc., it is certainly the case that volatility is back in markets right now. It is higher in many ways than we've seen for several years, and I think investors, especially newer investors, are having a tough time kind of digesting that, because honestly, even in 2022, when we saw some volatility there, it was very short-lived. COVID was very short-lived in terms of volatility we saw there, right? You had market breakers circuit breakers on the markets back in 2020 that hit. And so, I kind of shake this moment off because it wasn't as bad as that. But if it continues, I'm seeing it play out with people I speak to about their lack of confidence that they had gained over the last few years when it came to investing when markets are down, et cetera, et cetera. I think all of that's being challenged this year.
It is. It's been a year that's been just marred by up and down days. It just is something that really that you couldn't remember since 2020. That is the last period of time. The S&P had gained or lost at least 1% in 7 of the last 10 sessions, and April is going to be the most volatile calendar month. So it comes to a point when you're dealing with clients that you just want to make sure that their allocation is positioned appropriately during this period of volatility, because that's what you lean on in these times. And people who do not have an allocation that they're comfortable with, usually these periods of volatility leads to them questioning the strategy or getting emotionally upset by the ongoings of the market that we've seen over the last month.
And what worries me the most when I think about this overall situation is there's a lot of people that I've talked to over the course of the last year or so who maybe missed out on some of the big gains in 23 and 24 because they just didn't think they were possible. They maybe thought we were going into recession, or that taxes were going up, or any number of things might have played out. They are feeling like they are playing catch up, perhaps. And in many cases, the story I've heard is, I really thought, whether I agreed with his policies or not, I really thought that Donald Trump would be good for the stock market, and I might have gotten more aggressive because of that with my investment portfolio than I otherwise would have. And now I'm kind of sitting here. I'm not ruined. Most people haven't been ruined by this type of volatility unless you're all sorts of levered up into concentrated bets. But maybe just getting a little bit concerned about, okay, if this were to continue, if this does result in a recession, if the tariffs are back on play as they seem to be changing week to week, how am I positioned for something like that? And that's the good question to ask. It's not a great question to ask, like, hey, when should I sell all this and go to cash? Trying to time that, maybe somebody out there can do it, but I've never met them, and I certainly know that I can't try and figure out the timing of all of this because the news story is changing every day. The question to be asking yourself is, if we do get that worst case for stock markets, I'm not saying about the employment situation or manufacturing, but let's talk about the worst case for the stock market, which is a drawn-out, protracted recession with a deep drawdown in stocks. Will I be able to withstand that?